Let's start with The Surge. I went into it thinking, okay, another sci-fi post-apocalyptic action RPG. But it's so much more than that. The whole concept of this broken-down, futuristic factory setting is just awesome. It's gritty, industrial, and feels like everything is falling apart, which really adds to that sense of desperation as you're trying to survive. And honestly, the world building is better than I expected. You slowly uncover bits of the story as you explore, and the more you dig, the more you realize just how messed up everything is. Now, I've got to talk about the combat because that's really the star of the show here. It's tough, methodical, and every fight feels like it could be your last. But here's the twist that sets it apart. The whole targeting limbs mechanic. It's genius. You don't just hack and slash randomly. You're strategically aiming for enemy body parts. Want that awesome new arm gear? You better take it from your enemy. It makes every encounter feel like a high-stakes chess match, where you're constantly weighing the risk of going for the kill or trying to grab new loot. And the exosuit? Such a cool feature. It feels like you're wearing this clunky, powerful piece of machinery, and as you upgrade it, you can feel yourself getting stronger. But at the same time, the enemies ramp up in difficulty, so you're never too comfortable. It keeps you on your toes, for sure. Plus, the suit customization adds a ton of variety to the gameplay. So, yeah, The Surge is a gem. Next we have Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. Now, this is a game that doesn't hold back. From the moment you start, it's full throttle, no apologies. The story picks up right after the first one, and let me tell you, they dive straight into the madness. You've got BJ Blazkowicz, still the ultimate Nazi killing machine, but now even more battle-worn and broken, both physically and mentally. And yet, he's still got that fire. He's out for blood, but there's this deeper emotional side to him in this game that really surprised me. The gunplay is pure chaos in the best way. The weapons are so satisfying, and when you dual-wield two massive guns, it's like you're a one-man army mowing down everything in your path. The combat is fast, brutal, and it just feels good. Every shot has impact. And the enemies don't just drop. They explode into chunks when you hit them right. It's gloriously over the top, and I loved every second of it. Oh, and let's talk about the villains. Frau Engel? She's terrifying. She's not just some generic evil figure. She's genuinely unsettling, with this twisted obsession and cruelty that makes her a perfect antagonist. You really want to take her down, and that's what drives you forward. The way the game builds tension between you and her is brilliant, and every time she shows up, you know things are about to get wild. The characters are fantastic. Whether it's old friends from the Resistance or new allies you meet along the way, everyone's got their own personality, and it makes you care about them. Some scenes had me laughing, others had me really thinking, and a few hit me harder than I expected. Next we have Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Ubisoft had a pretty solid reputation with the previous game, Ghost Recon Wildlands, so expectations were high for this one. But when Breakpoint dropped, it was met with a ton of criticism. People were upset with everything, from the bugs and glitches to the live service elements and microtransactions. Some felt the game had drifted too far from what made the Ghost Recon series great, tactical, squad-based military action. A lot of the backlash was around the game's focus on looter-shooter mechanics. Fans of the series weren't too happy about the addition of gear scores and loot systems, which felt more like something out of the Division rather than a tactical military shooter. That shift towards a more RPG-like system was jarring for longtime fans, and many felt it took away from the realism and immersion they loved about the franchise. Another big complaint was the lack of AI teammates at launch, which had been a staple in past Ghost Recon games. Instead, you were forced to play solo or with real players in co-op, and that left some players feeling like the experience was incomplete. But here's the thing. Ubisoft listened to the feedback. Over time, they patched the game, added new features, and really worked to improve the overall experience. AI teammates were eventually brought back, and many of the issues with bugs and balance were addressed. The game today is a much better, more polished version than it was at launch. Despite the rough start, Breakpoint offers a lot for fans of tactical shooters. It's a solid game that's way better than people give it credit for. Next we have Dying Light. You know, there's something about Dying Light that just pulls you in. It's not just another zombie game. And trust me, I've played my share. What really grabbed me when I first picked it up was the way it mixed parkour with zombie survival. I mean, You're not just running from zombies, you're vaulting over fences, climbing buildings, and pulling off these crazy fluid parkour moves that make you feel like you're actually there. It's like the city is your playground, but with the constant threat of the undead breathing down your neck. That mix of freedom and fear, it's exhilarating. And the city of Heron? It's gritty, dirty, and oozing with atmosphere. During the day, you're mostly dealing with the slow, lumbering zombies, and you start to feel kind of bold, like, yeah, I got this. You're scavenging, crafting weapons, taking out a few zombies here and there, feeling pretty good about yourself. But as soon as night falls, it's like the game flips the script. You go from being the predator to the prey. Those volatiles, they still haunt me, honestly. The first time one spotted me, I panicked and barely escaped. The night cycle adds this whole other layer of tension, making you think twice before staying out too late. One of my favorite things, though, is how the game encourages creativity. You're not just limited to using guns or blunt objects. No, you can modify weapons, throw firecrackers to distract the undead, or set traps. I remember finding a baseball bat and modding it to electrocute zombies. Next we have Doom Eternal, a game that's just pure adrenaline. From the moment you start, it's like the game grabs you by the collar and throws you into this insane, demon-filled chaos. The pacing is so fast and relentless, it makes you feel like this unstoppable force. You're not just playing as the Doomslayer, you are the Doomslayer, and it's awesome. One thing I love about Doom Eternal is how it forces you to play aggressively. You can't just hide behind cover and pick off enemies from a distance like in other shooters. No way. You have to get in their faces, constantly moving, switching weapons, and using your chainsaw to keep your ammo up. It's this perfect mix of strategy and brutality. There's no time to breathe. And honestly, that's what makes it so much fun. Every fight feels like a frantic dance of destruction, and once you get the rhythm down, it's such a rush. The combat loop is where it really shines. You're always juggling resources, health, armor, ammo, and you get those by fighting. Need health? Glory kill a demon. Low on armor? Set enemies on fire with the flame belch. It's a constant back and forth, and it makes every encounter feel dynamic. You never just shoot your way through a room, you're managing the chaos. And that's what makes it so addicting. And the weapons, man. Each one feels so satisfying. The shotgun, the plasma rifle, the BFG. It's all there. And it's all beefed up to feel more powerful than ever. Doom Eternal is an absolute must-play. It's intense, it's challenging, and it's just pure, unfiltered fun. Next we have Final Fantasy XVI. I wasn't sure what to expect going in because the series has gone through so many different styles, but this one really grabbed me right away. First off, the story got this darker, more mature vibe compared to some of the other Final Fantasy games. I love how it dives deep into political drama, with all these nations fighting over the power of the Eikons. It feels like you're watching this epic medieval fantasy unfold. And speaking of Ikonso, man, those battles are insane. You've got these massive cinematic showdowns between these godlike creatures. The scale of it all is just jaw-dropping. Plus, the real-time combat system. It's smooth, it's fast, and it's so satisfying when you pull off these combos and juggle enemies midair. I think that shift away from the turn-based combat really helps the game feel fresh, you know? Now, the world of Valisthea is stunning. Everywhere you go, the landscapes just pull you in. From vast deserts to lush forests, it's one of those worlds that begs to be explored. I found myself constantly stopping to just take in the view. The towns and cities feel lived into each. One has its own vibe, and I loved talking to NPCs and learning more about the world's lore. Plus, the side quests, they actually have depth. It's not just go fetch this or kill that, but instead, they give you more context about the world and characters, which I always appreciate. I think the only thing that threw me off at first was how different it feels from classic Final Fantasy games. But honestly, it's a good thing. It's like the series is evolving, trying new things. Next we have Uncharted 4. This is one of those games that grabs you from the very first moment. If you've played any of the previous Uncharted games, you know what to expect. Action, adventure, treasure hunts, and a lot of intense moments. But Uncharted 4 just hits differently. It feels like a perfect blend of everything we loved about the series, but with a more mature, reflective tone. Nathan Drake is back, and this time, he's facing his greatest challenge yet. What's really cool is that the game dives deeper into his personal life, showing a side of Nathan we don't usually see. He's older, more settled, and you can tell he's trying to move on from his treasure hunting days. But of course, things don't stay quiet for long. The game does a great job of building up that tension between wanting to leave the past behind and being pulled back in. It's something that feels relatable, even if we're not all globe-trotting adventurers. The visuals in this game are absolutely stunning. Whether you're scaling cliffs in Scotland or exploring ancient ruins in Madagascar, everything looks so incredibly detailed. Sometimes, I would just stop for a moment to take in the scenery, which is something I don't usually do in action games. The environments feel alive, and they draw you into the story in a way that makes it feel like you're watching a movie, but also in control of the action. Speaking of the action, Uncharted 4 nails the gameplay. The combat, the platforming, and even the puzzle solving all feel smooth and satisfying. Next we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider. For some reason, it didn't get the love it deserved when it first came out. I mean, Lara Croft is a gaming icon, and the rebooted trilogy had been going strong, but when Shadow of the Tomb Raider dropped, it kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people. But honestly, this game is way better than its reputation suggests. Well, a lot of it came down to timing. Shadow of the Tomb Raider launched during a crowded time, with some big AAA games releasing around the same period, so it got overshadowed. Plus, some critics said it didn't do enough to innovate from the previous two games. People expected something groundbreaking after Rise of the Tomb Raider, but instead, they got a game that felt more like an evolution than a revolution. But here's the thing, what's so bad about sticking to a formula that works? The story, for example, is actually pretty deep. And let's not forget the world building. Shadow of the Tomb Raider has some of the most beautiful environments in the entire series. From dense jungles to hidden tombs, the game is visually stunning. The tombs themselves are more complex and rewarding than before, with some really creative puzzles that feel satisfying to solve. If you love the exploration and puzzle-solving aspects of Tomb Raider, this game nails it. Combat also feels more refined. Sure, it's not the focus as much as it was in the earlier reboot games, but that actually works in the game's favor. Shadow of the Tomb Raider encourages stealth and strategy over pure action, which fits the tone of the game. Next we have BioShock Infinite. This game had a huge amount of hype before its release, and when it finally came out, some people loved it, and others felt it was a step down from the more atmospheric and horror-focused tone of the first two games in the series. One of the big reasons it got some backlash was that it moved away from the darker, more claustrophobic setting of Rapture to the bright, floating city of Columbia. Instead of lurking around creepy corridors, you're soaring through the sky on rails, fighting in these grand, open environments. That change in tone didn't sit well with some players who were hoping for the same intense, eerie vibes they got in the original BioShock. The combat also shifted to be a lot more fast-paced and action-heavy, which wasn't everyone's cup of tea. Some fans missed the slower, more strategic approach of the earlier games, and they felt like Infinite was a little too much like a standard first-person shooter. The introduction of Elizabeth as an AI companion, while praised by many for how well she was integrated into gameplay, also rubbed some players the wrong way, feeling like it made the game more linear or scripted. Yeah, it's different from the first BioShock, but that doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, it's bold for even daring to be so different. It tells a complex, layered story that's still talked about today, and while the gameplay might be more action-heavy, it's polished and engaging. So while BioShock Infinite has its detractors, it's absolutely worth playing, especially if you're into games that tackle big ideas. Next we have Resident Evil 2 Remake. Just have to say, it's one of those rare gems that genuinely impresses on every level. When Capcom decided to breathe new life into this classic, they didn't just update the graphics, they reimagined the entire experience. From the moment you start the game, the atmosphere grabs you. The detailed environments, the haunting sounds, and the meticulously crafted lighting all work together to create this incredibly immersive experience. It's like stepping back into Raccoon City with a whole new set of eyes. And the characters? Oh man, Leon and Claire are better than ever. Their voice acting feels authentic, their emotions resonate, and you really start to care about their journey. It's so much more than just a survival horror game. It's a story about resilience and courage in the face of unimaginable odds. The gameplay is also top-notch. The over-the-shoulder camera is such a brilliant choice. It adds a layer of tension and immediacy that makes every encounter with a zombie or licker feel intensely personal. And those moments when you're low on ammo, frantically searching for a safe room, they're the stuff of pure adrenaline. What's really impressive is how the remake pays homage to the original while still offering something fresh. The puzzles and level design have been updated, but they maintain the spirit of what made the 1998 version so special. It's like rediscovering an old friend who's now even cooler and more complex. Another thing worth mentioning is how the game doesn't rely solely on jump scares. Next we have Mafia Definitive Edition. Alright, so I just finished this game and honestly I'm still processing how good it was. You know when a game just sticks with you? That's how this one feels. I've always had a soft spot for the original Mafia, but this remake? Wow, they really outdid themselves. It's like stepping into the 1930s for real. First off, the atmosphere. I don't know how they nailed the vibe of that era so perfectly. The city of Lost Heaven is just alive. Every little detail, from the cars to the buildings to the music, it really pulls you into that world. There were moments when I just wanted to drive around and take it all in, not even worrying about the mission at hand. Like, who knew 1930s radio stations would get me this hyped? And the story, it's not just a typical mobster narrative. You really get invested in Tommy Angelo's rise in the Salieri crime family. It's like playing through one of those classic gangster movies, but you're in control. I actually found myself sympathizing with him, which is wild considering, he's a criminal. But the voice acting, the facial expressions, it's all so believable. It draws you into the point where you care about these characters, even when they're making some seriously bad choices. Gameplay-wise, it's got that nice balance between action and story. Sure, there are shootouts and car chases, but I think what got me hooked was how well paced it all felt. It doesn't rush you. The combat feels more polished this time around too. And the driving? I never thought I'd say this, but driving those old school cars was actually fun. Next we have Assassin's Creed Origins. It didn't win Game of the Year, but absolutely deserved to be in the conversation. After the series took a bit of a break, Origins came back swinging, and it basically reinvented the entire franchise. This was the game that moved Assassin's Creed from a more linear, mission-based structure to a full-blown open-world RPG. And it did it in style. First off, ancient Egypt as a setting? Incredible. The world they built in Origins was stunning, from the sprawling deserts to the bustling cities of Alexandria and Memphis. You could just wander around for hours, exploring tombs, pyramids, and hidden secrets. The amount of detail they put into recreating Egypt was mind-blowing, and it felt like you were actually stepping into history. Plus, playing as the first assassin was a breath of fresh air. He was such a well-rounded character, with a personal story that drove the whole plot forward in a meaningful way. The combat system was also completely overhauled. Gone were the days of just counter-killing everything in sight. Origins introduced a more dynamic, skill-based combat system that required you to dodge, block, and actually strategize during fights. It felt much more engaging and challenging compared to the older games. They also introduced RPG elements like leveling up, skill trees, and loot, which added a ton of depth to the gameplay. But here's the thing. 2017 was a ridiculously stacked year for gaming. The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Horizon Zero Dawn both came out that year. Next we have Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. This game is like every Star Wars fan's dream come to life. Seriously, if you've ever imagined wielding a lightsaber, dodging blaster shots, or facing off against terrifying Sith enemies, Fallen Order is the game for you. It just pulls you in and makes you feel like a Jedi in training. And it's just so much fun. This game takes you all over the Star Wars galaxy, from lush forests to crumbling ancient ruins and everything in between. Each planet has its own feel, its own mysteries, and its own set of enemies and challenges. There's this amazing sense of adventure as you move from planet to planet, uncovering secrets, exploring caves, and finding new paths. And the level design is a blast. It's got that classic Metroidvania vibe, where you keep discovering new abilities that let you access areas you couldn't reach before. You're constantly rewarded for exploring and backtracking, which just makes the whole journey so satisfying. Swinging a lightsaber in Fallen Order feels right. There's a weight to it, and when you deflect a blaster bolt back at a stormtrooper, pure joy. The combat strikes this perfect balance between fun and challenging. It's not button mashing. You actually have to time your attacks, parries, and dodges to succeed, which makes every encounter feel intense and meaningful. Plus, as you go along, you get to customize your lightsaber. You can pick different colors, hilts, and other parts to make it feel like your weapon, which is just such a cool touch. Fallen Order has an incredible story that feels like it could totally be its own Star Wars movie. Next we have Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. If you're familiar with the Yakuza series, you already know you're in for something big, bold, and just a little over the top. This game picks up with our guy, Ichiban Kasuga, who's back for another round of absolute chaos, heartwarming moments, and more twists than you can count. And let me tell you, if you're ready for a journey that's equal parts action, drama, and pure hilarity, this one's going to hit the spot. What makes Infinite Wealth stand out is how it blends a serious story with some of the funniest, most bizarre side activities you'll ever see. One minute, you're dealing with intense emotional scenes. The next, you're wrapped up in a totally ridiculous minigame, and you're laughing because it's so outrageous. It's like they managed to throw in every wild idea they could think of, and somehow it all works. And with Ichiban leading the way, every moment feels fresh and unpredictable. Now, the turn-based combat, it's back, and better than ever. The strategy side of things adds this fun layer to every battle, and it's packed with quirky moves that only a game like a Dragon could pull off. And if you've played the previous games, you'll notice the combat's even more refined here. It's still got that signature mix of outlandish attacks and strategic depth, which makes every fight feel epic and hilarious at the same time. But beyond the action, it's really about the characters. Ichiban is one of those protagonists who's impossible not to root for. He's got this mix of loyalty, optimism, and pure heart that makes him stand out. Infinite Wealth is a must-play. Next we have The Last of Us. Oh man, where do I even begin? You know how some games just stick with you long after you've finished them? That's exactly what The Last of Us did for me. It's so emotionally charged. Like, I knew it was going to be intense, but it's even more than I expected. Joel and Ellie's relationship? It's not just a typical protect the girl storyline. They feel like real people with real flaws. I think that's what I loved most, how raw and human it all feels. You watch them grow together in this messed up world, and it's not always pretty, but it's real. Speaking of the world, the post-apocalyptic setting is both terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Naughty Dog nailed that feeling of dread when you're walking through those overgrown cities. It's eerie, especially with the sound design. The clickers? Man, every time I heard them, my heart rate went up. And they're not even the worst part. The humans in this game? Sometimes they're scarier than the infected. But honestly, it's the quieter moments that hit me the hardest. There's this one scene with Ellie in the giraffe sequence that made me just stop and take it in. In a world where everything's falling apart, there are still these tiny glimpses of beauty, you know? It makes you think about how people hold on to hope, even in the worst situations. Gameplay-wise, it's super tight. There's this constant balance of stealth, action, and scavenging. But what I appreciated most was how every encounter felt like it had stakes. You don't always have enough resources to just go guns blazing, so you've got to be smart about how you handle situations. Next we have Horizon Zero Dawn. You ever play a game that completely pulls you into its world and makes you forget time exists? From the very start, it hit me with its vast open world and beautiful landscapes. It's like stepping into a future where nature and machines are in this strange yet fascinating balance. The contrast of lush forests, snowy mountains, and decaying remnants of the old world just blew me away. I'd find myself stopping, not to complete a mission, but just to take in the view. What really pulled me in was Aloy, the main character. She's strong, independent, and driven, but still relatable. Her journey to uncover the truth about her past kept me hooked, and I felt a connection with her that not many games manage to achieve. Every interaction, every choice made me feel like I was walking her path, not just controlling her through a screen. The machines in Horizon are some of the most unique enemies I've ever encountered. They're massive, unpredictable, and have this alien feel to them, yet they belong perfectly in this world. Each machine required a different approach, forcing me to think and adapt. It never felt repetitive. Instead, it kept things fresh, especially when you take down something huge like a Thunderjaw. I remember the first time I did, and it felt like a massive victory. The combat made me feel like a hunter, not just a fighter, and that added a layer of depth I really appreciated. The story also has a lot going for it. There's mystery, there's emotion, and there's this haunting sense of loss throughout the game. Next we have Fallout 4. This game is all about exploring a massive, post-apocalyptic world filled with adventure, surprises, and the freedom to forge your own story. Right from the start, you're stepping into a world that feels alive. Well, as alive as a wasteland can be. You emerge into this beautifully ruined version of Boston, and there's this sense of mystery about what happened. who survived, and how you'll carve out your place in it. One of the best parts about Fallout 4 is just how much freedom you have. Want to be a hero, saving settlements and helping people out? Go for it. Prefer to be more of a lone wanderer, exploring every nook and cranny at your own pace? You can totally do that too. The game really lets you make those decisions and watch as the world reacts to you, which makes it feel super personal. And the combat? Super satisfying. You can target specific body parts on enemies, which gives battles a bit of a strategic twist. Whether you're up against raiders, mutated creatures, or robots, every fight keeps you on your toes. And the weapon variety is massive. You can go from a simple pipe pistol to a full-blown laser rifle, whatever fits your style. Plus, there's so much to discover. Every abandoned shack, rusted-out car, and hidden bunker has a story, whether it's in the form of an old journal, a skeleton in an odd place, or a stash of supplies that makes you wonder who left it behind. Fallout 4 is full of these tiny details that make the world feel rich and layered, like you're uncovering secrets at every turn. Next we have Mass Effect Legendary Edition. If you haven't played the Mass Effect series yet, you're in for a serious treat. And if you have, well, this remastered edition is the perfect excuse to dive back into one of the most iconic sci-fi RPGs out there. Right from the start, the game just grabs you. You're Commander Shepard, and your choices shape the entire galaxy. The stakes feel huge, but what's cool is that you're never just watching the story happen. You're actively making choices that change everything. And I mean everything from little side stories to major plot twists. It's one of those games where you actually feel the weight of your decisions. And that's rare. And the galaxy? It's incredible. You're exploring different planets, seeing all these unique alien cultures, and uncovering a rich sci-fi world with every mission. It's like living in your own sci-fi epic, from the action-packed battles to the quiet moments of exploration. The Legendary Edition really brings this world to life too, with upgraded visuals that make each planet and environment feel fresh, vibrant, and epic in scale. The combat is a blast too. Whether you're going full biotic powers or charging in guns blazing, there's a style that fits however you want to play. And with all the upgrades and tweaks in this edition, it feels smoother than ever, especially in the first game, which has been brought up to speed with the later ones. Plus, the Legendary Edition has smoothed out some of the rough edges, making it even easier for new players to jump in and get the full experience. It's got everything: epic space battles and a world that just feels alive. Next, we have Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. I can honestly say, it's unlike anything I've played before. Right from the beginning, it sets a tone that's dark, emotional, and deeply immersive. You can tell it's more than just an action-adventure game. There's a deeper story here, and it pulls you in with every step Senua takes on her journey. The story is so emotional, especially as it deals with mental health in such a powerful way. The way they portray Senua's psychosis, the voices in her head, it's also unsettling but fascinating at the same time. It's like you're constantly living inside her mind, and that really makes you connect with her. It's rare to see a game tackle such a heavy topic with so much respect and depth. And then there's the combat. It's intense, but it's not over the top. It feels personal. Like every fight is a struggle for survival. You're not just slashing through enemies for the sake of it. Each battle feels like it has weight, like Senua's fighting for something bigger. And the way the game makes you feel isolated, with those stunning landscapes that somehow feel both beautiful and haunting, it just adds to the experience. The audio design really stood out to me too. Wearing headphones made a huge difference. The voices surround you, whispering in your ear, sometimes confusing you, sometimes guiding you. It's such a smart use of sound to mess with your mind, making you question what's real. Just like Senua, I found myself genuinely tense during certain moments, not because of jump scares, but because of that constant feeling of unease. Next, we have Sniper Elite 4. It's set in World War II Italy, and let me tell you, it's way more than just a standard shooter. This game actually has you thinking, planning, and sneaking around, which makes it so much more engaging than just running and gunning. It's a nice change from the darker, grittier locations. There's this real sense of place, like you're actually on these missions behind enemy lines. You can even explore different routes and vantage points, so every mission feels open-ended. It's not a game that tells you, go here, do this. You have the freedom to get creative with your approach. Now, the big star of Sniper Elite 4 has to be the sniping itself. I mean, there's a reason Sniper is in the title. The sniping mechanics here are awesome. The game takes everything into account: distance, wind, even gravity, so every shot feels earned. And then there's that iconic X-ray cam. When you land a perfect shot, the camera follows the bullet in slow motion, and you get this X-ray view of it ripping through your target. It's kind of gruesome, but also so ridiculously satisfying. You know they nailed the shot mechanics when you can feel the weight of each shot. It's like a mini celebration every time you get it just right. But Sniper Elite 4 isn't just about staying a mile away from enemies and picking them off one by one. It's a full-on stealth experience. You have to be smart about where you go, how you hide, and how you move around. You can use the environment to mask your shots, like firing when a plane goes overhead or when a generator is making noise. It makes you feel like a real sniper, working with whatever you have to stay unnoticed.